to worship with you this morning, but first, turn to someone around you and say hi.
Well, good morning and welcome. How's everyone doing today? Good? Well done. All right, can we welcome everyone who might be joining us online today? So grateful to have you and look forward to worshiping with you sometime live and in person right here at our campus in Geneva, Illinois. Well, today is a very, very special day for me, so thank you for all joining to celebrate me. Actually, today is Carrie and I's 30th anniversary. Isn't that awesome? So I feel like we're off to a good start. So I'm excited and look forward to a lot of more years with the most amazing person I've ever met. I do want to celebrate, too, with all of us, the staff and I. This week, every week we meet, and we always go over some of the things that were really great from the last week, and we review some things that we might need to tweak or work on that are going on within our community. And we just started celebrating some of the things that had gone on, and we started thinking about the summer and just what a phenomenal place we feel like God really has us positioned. And it was fascinating because I met with a group of pastors a week ago, and that was kind of the sense. It was almost electric in this group of pastors. And after a couple years of some really rough seasons for a lot of church leadership, it was just exciting. So this year, just over the last couple things, we did the backyard Bible clubs again this year, and we did it in twice as many places with twice as many kids. Cougars Days, a couple weeks ago, there was like 100 of you. We actually ran out of tickets and had to reorder twice because so many of you came out and were a part and just had an amazing time. Serve Day this year was one of the biggest ones we've had in forever, and so many of you were participating. A lot of the places where we have been going for years, we were just kind of blowing it out in terms of the number of people that were participating and the amount of things that you guys were actually getting accomplished. And so I just want to say a huge thank you, celebrate all the hard work that went into this summer. And really, it's a big part of why we're so poised as we move into the fall to expect God to do something really powerful in our teams, in our groups, in our families, in our marriage, in our kids, and in our family as a church. And so I'm excited. And to kind of celebrate and kick off all of that, in a couple weeks, we have our big fun service. And so we always talk about our core values sometime around the end of summer. And we have 5 core values. But today, we're going to end with core value number 4, because we always save our 5th core value, which is have fun, for our big fun service. So we hope that you will be a part of that. Fun service is coming up in just a few weeks, and you'll have an opportunity, I think either this week or next week as you leave, to get invite cards. Those can be reminders for you, stick them on the fridge, or a better way to use those are give them to friends, family, neighbors, co-workers, classmates, whatever. Bring them out. They're going to have a blast. It's always a lot of fun. We'll have tons of good food and snacks and all kinds of things for everybody. So we hope that you'll be a part of that. Well, we are rounding out today our series on family values, and we've been sort of looking at our response, and maybe not just our response, but really sort of our state of mind, our state of being, as we think about where our culture is and as we look forward into the season that we're going into. Over the last couple years, there have literally been seismic, tectonic level shifts that have happened globally, and they have impacted us specifically in our culture and in our country. And these disruptions have dramatically accelerated some of our societal and cultural evolution that we were seeing, and it impacts every one of us at a personal level in our home, in our parenting, in our marriages, in our work, in all of these different things. But that sudden burst of energy also has shook a lot of the lethargy out of people to cause them to actually take a deeper look, a closer examination of some of the changing assumptions that are happening in our world, some of the changing assumptions that are happening in our communities. We've been talking and thinking for the last few years about things like economic inequality and about oppression of the poor. We've looked at issues like racism and the systematic marginalization of certain people groups. We've talked about gender and pay gaps. We've talked about gender and sexuality, and we've looked at things like human rights and human dignity. The thing that we need sort of a North Star. We need a fixed point, something that we know isn't going to shift, something that isn't going to change, that ultimately helps us stay fixed in the midst of all of these changing and tumultuous things. Solomon, years ago, hundreds of years before Christ, in Ecclesiastes 1:9, said, history is always just repeating itself. It has all been done before. There's not really anything that is truly new under the sun. And so we know that we can take these timeless truths that God has given us, as well as His Spirit and the person of Jesus Christ, and we can anchor, we can tether ourselves to those fixed points, and they will help inform for us how we think, how we speak, how we live, how we interact in the midst of all of these other things that at times feel like they're moving and shifting and breaking loose. So we looked at our primary principle, our number one core value, and the primary command in all of Scripture, which is that Christ is the first, the middle, and the end of everything that we ever do. In other places, Scripture says it like this, that we have to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, that He has to be preeminent. There can't be anything before Him. There can't be anything with Him. Nothing is equal to Him. And we can't even have anything too close. Paul leans in when he is talking to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians, to a church, to a culture that was dramatically impacted by every wind of what was happening culturally and all of the cultural pressures. It was probably the most jacked up church in the first century. And this is his instruction. This is his encouragement to them. He says, when I was with you, I decided that I would forget everything except for Jesus Christ, the one who was crucified. I came to you in weakness and timid and trembling, and my message, my tactics, my preaching, they were very plain. They were very straightforward. They were very simple. Rather than using sort of clever rhetoric or devices or persuasive speeches, the only thing I relied on was the power of the Holy Spirit. And I did that so that you would not trust in human wisdom, but that you would trust in the power of God. In other words, Paul was saying, listen, I know that the world puts all kind of pressure on us to try to do all different things in order to bring about outcomes in our lives, in our culture, in our communities. But the reality is, the more we lean into all of those kinds of things, the more separated we actually become from Christ. But the more we lean into Christ, the more we find ourselves actually better positioned, better prepared to be able to face all the things that we will experience in life. And so from that, we looked at our second and our third core values, which is that love is a behavior that we choose to walk in, and life is a lesson. So today, we're looking at our fourth core value, which is in everything give thanks. And this is an interesting core value because it's probably the one that on its face looks like the most obvious and easiest thing to do. But the reality is if you've ever tried to live a life of constant gratitude and thanks and expectation and hope, you know that it is incredibly difficult. It actually reminds me of a passage in Scripture that Paul writes in Philippians 4:13. He says this, he says, I can do everything through Christ who gives me the strength. Now, that's a super familiar passage. We have it on our book markers, and we have it on our little plaques on our walls, and we write it on our Post-its and stick it in our bathroom. It's our personal mantras. And the reality is that this Scripture is amazing. It's so beautiful and powerful and hope-giving. The problem is that we don't necessarily always have a right or a full understanding. And it isn't that we sort of misapply the passage, it's that we too narrowly apply the reality of the passage to our lives in the same way that it's too easy for us to think too narrowly about our value of thanksgiving. So I want to talk to you today about the idea of really learning to be content in all things. And when I say content, I don't just mean like, that'll do. You know, like when you're at a restaurant or you're at a wedding and it's like there's two options, neither one of them you're very thrilled about. And so you're just trying to figure out which one is the least of the two bad options, and you're like, that'll do. I'm not talking about that. This idea of contentment is the idea that I'm full, I'm good. It's like when you're at the end of a great meal and then someone's like, oh my gosh, I forgot to get out blank. And it's something wonderful. Maybe it's your favorite fruit or vegetable or dessert or whatever it is. But man, you're so full at just the right level. It's like you don't want to mess that up because you're good. That's the idea, that God wants us to have this profound sense of good, this profound sense of peace, this profound sense that everything is right with the world and our life, regardless of what we might be experiencing all the way around it. That's really the heart of our promise. If we back up just a couple sentences in Paul's letter to the Philippians, this is what he said. He said, I've learned how to be content in whatever I have. I've learned to be at rest in whatever's going on. I've learned to have peace, no matter how much chaos might be swirling around in my world. I know how to live on almost nothing, or I can be really cool when I have everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or an empty one, with plenty or with little. And here's our promise. Because I can do all things, like I can rock it when things are going good. I can be gracious and kind. I don't have to hold that over anybody's head or think that I'm better than somebody because things are working out for me right now. But I can also be amazing when everything seems like it's crumbling and falling apart, because I know that my life, my security is not wrapped up in my circumstances or my situation, that there's something so much deeper and richer and fuller that is ultimately the source of my life. Things will go wrong. I know that doesn't sound like a good preaching leadoff. Everyone look at your neighbor and say, things will go wrong. Things will go wrong. You're gonna have seasons in your life that are just terrible. And they may never make sense on this side of eternity. Every now and then I hear someone say, well, God, everything happens for a reason. And I always say, no, they don't. I don't even care if I don't know them. They could be talking to someone else in line in front of me. Things happen for a reason. No, they don't. There's all kinds of stupid, senseless things that happen in the world. The idea is when someone says everything happens for a reason, they're saying God did that. And God's doing it to you or for you. And that's not always true. There are other elements at work. There is your sin that has broken the world. There is Satan, who is alive and active and seeking to devour. And then there's just my own knuckleheadness that causes me to do dumb things. And when you do dumb things, you win dumb prizes. But here's the problem. The problem is the gap that exists between my expectations and my experience sets me up for failure. So as Christians, when I have this sense that God is working everything together for the good, but I'm experiencing something that doesn't feel good, or I can't make sense of it in the moment, but I assume that God is up to something, then all of a sudden it sends me into crisis. That's why every one of us knows somebody who went through something terrible and it shipwrecked their faith. And the reality is we will all experience things that have no meaning, but God did promise that if we would bring them to him, not that he had caused it, not that he enjoyed it or liked it, but he promised that he could work with it, that he could somehow fold it in and together with his will to produce something that is ultimately good for you and brings glory and honor to him. But it does require that we anticipate, that we learn to expect that difficult things are going to happen. Because when we start to anticipate that difficult, senseless things are taking place all the time in our lives and in the world, that helps us to rehearse and learn to abide in the faithfulness and the goodness of God, regardless of our circumstances. See, when I know it's coming, it can't sweep my legs from the side because I'm constantly positioning myself in Christ for whatever it is that the world is going to throw my way. There's a beautiful sort of living out of this reality, and it happens in the life of Jesus on the last night that he's with his disciples. In the Gospel of John, John really unpacks the conversation that Jesus has with his disciples following the Last Supper as they're making their way to the garden where he prays and is ultimately arrested. And we have this beautiful sort of insight. And Jesus is talking to them a little bit figuratively, a little bit hyperbolic, and they're still struggling to understand. And finally, he just says to them, listen, I came from the Father, and I'm about to go back to the Father. And they said to him, basically, in essence, well, now we get it. Now that you're finally speaking to us plainly and clearly, we realize you really do know what's going on. You understand. You have a sense about what's going to take place. And we know that you don't need to be taught by anyone because you're God, and now we really believe. And Jesus says this to them. He says, so now you finally believe. Like the last 3.5 years, that wasn't enough. Now you finally believe. But he says, but here's what I want you to know. Because in their mind, they're like, oh, we get it. We get it. We've all had those moments in our lives where we're like, oh, I've got it. My wife tells a story when she was young. She wasn't good at math, and that's probably never changed, but especially when she was young, she was not good at math. And so she had a best friend who was phenomenal at school. She was a great test taker. So she and Debbie studied like for 4 hours one night for a test. And Debbie was so excited because, to see what Carrie's grade was. And of course, she just failed it. But at some point in the night, Carrie was like, oh, I think I got it. I think it all just locked in. And that's us, right? We get to a place and we're like, I got it, I figured it out. And then the very next thing that happens in our life just is like a glaring reminder, you don't have it. You don't have it. And that's really what was going on. Jesus is saying, listen, I know you think you have it, but the truth is you don't have it. He said, you finally believe me, but the time is coming, indeed is here now, when you're actually going to be scattered. You're all going to abandon me, each one of you going his own way, and you will leave me completely alone. And yet, I'm not alone. I'll never be alone because the Father is always with me. And then he says this. He says, and I want you to understand why I'm telling you this. I want you to understand why I'm giving you a heads up about your own weakness. I want you to understand why I'm giving you a heads up about your own failure. I've told you this so that you could actually have peace. I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm not saying this to prove how bad you are in contrast to how awesome I am. I'm actually saying this to you so that you will understand that I understand your frailty, that I understand your brokenness, and I love you anyway. I've told you all this so that you could find peace. solidness, establishment in me. Because here on this earth, you will always have trials and sorrows. But take heart, have courage, because I have overcome the world. That word there where he says that I've come to give you peace, it's the word irene. And what it means is it doesn't mean like peace between a group of people, right? Like we're not at war with anybody, or within a relationship, like you're not fighting. It's not about the absence of conflict. Also, it doesn't have the understanding of our attitude or our mindset. So it's not like I feel really good about what's happening, I'm at peace. It actually is a state of being, like a mountain that is just established like stone, and everything else can move and shake. But this thing doesn't. That's what Jesus is talking about here, where he says, listen, I've told you all this so that you could have peace, so that you could have that absolute solid assurance that you would be rooted. And there are three contrasts that we see in this text that are very, very important for us to understand. The first one, he says, is he's contrasting the idea of in him, in me, or in this world. That's an important contrast for us to see. The second contrast he's talking about here is he's talking about peace, this idea of wholeness and health, or this idea of troubles and sorrows and struggles and all of those kinds of things. And then finally, he draws this contrast between the idea that you may have or that you will have. Now, when we hear him say something like, well, you may have peace in me, we're thinking, he's like, roll the dice on me. Like, you know what? If I feel benevolent today and you've done everything right, maybe, just maybe, you're going to experience peace. That is not what he's saying here. Nothing could be further from. What he's saying is, in this world you will have struggles because you are all in this world. Raise your hand if you are in this world. Look around. If your neighbor isn't raising their hand, scoot away from them. Scoot away. All of us are here in this world, and this world is a mess. It's broken. It's shattered. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna pound. It's gonna do everything it can to cause pain. That is just the state of reality. And to deny that or to not acknowledge it is actually destructive. And everyone is in this world, but everyone isn't in Jesus. That's why he says you may, because you get to choose. You are in this world, and it will be hard, but you could also, at the same time, be in Christ. And if you're in Christ, then in the midst of trials and sorrows, there will be peace. That's what Jesus is trying to say. He's contrasting this idea of life without him and life with him. And what's interesting is that Jesus is saying all of this in the shadow of his prediction. So he's telling them all of this even as he has just accused them of going to betray. They haven't betrayed yet. They've gone this far with him, and yet he's saying, you're not going to make it. You're not going to finish the race with me. And their minds are just frustrated. He said, you're going to be scattered. You're going to leave me completely alone. And so tethered to this idea of their desertion is the understanding of victory and peace. And the idea was, he was saying, listen, you're going to leave. I need to make sure that you have a way back. That when you've struggled, when you've fallen, when the realities of not only the world's brokenness, but your own brokenness come crashing in and try to create separation between you and me, that you won't forget that I knew that. I knew that about you. And I loved you so much that I told you in advance so that you could come back to me at just the right time, that you could enter back into my peace, that you would enter back into my love. And that's why he could say to them with such confidence, take heart, be courageous, be hopeful. There's an idea in all of the Jewish wisdom writings that oftentimes would personify wisdom. And one of the sayings, particularly from Solomon, was that wisdom looked to the future and she had this sort of sideways grin on her face. She would smile. She would see all the things that it had. She would see all the things that were going to be hard, but she would still have this sense of anticipation in her heart. Take courage. Take heart. And that's what I want you to know. You know, just a cursory scrolling through social media, just a cursory watching the news, and there is more than enough stuff for us to feel stressed about. We're in the middle of an election cycle where the two forerunners look like villain characters out of a post-apocalyptic dystopic novel. Our economy seems like it is teetering on the brink of struggle while they continue to raise interest rates and make it harder and harder for people, if they can find a place to live, to be able to get into a place to live. We see a constant tension between different people groups in our culture, and the gap doesn't seem to be getting smaller. Every time we look, it seems to be getting wider and wider. And now there's talk about COVID and numbers ticking up and hospitalization ticking up. And so it would be so easy for us to be sitting here on the precipice of this fall and allowing fear and doubt and anxiety to just cripple us, to turn our eyes away from Christ, or to go scrambling after any one of a number of human devices and tactics. And Paul says, remember, that's not the way. That's not our way. It doesn't lead to peace. It's not solid. It shifts and changes with every wind of culture or animus. But we have something solid. We have a promise from Christ who said, I will overcome the world. I have overcome the world. Jesus literally goes to the cross with a conviction in his heart that that was the path that would ultimately lead him to drawing all things back to himself and being restored. And John is writing his letter 60 years after the death and the resurrection of Jesus. He now, half a century later, sees the fruit, the reality of everything that Jesus had said. In the Gospels on Holy Week, one of the things that Jesus did was he predicted the destruction of the temple. He predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, and he literally wept over it. August 4th of 70 AD, Jerusalem was invaded. It was broken. The walls were destroyed. The temple was burned. Everything was lost. Jesus prophesied that the temple would be destroyed and that people would scatter. Over the 30 years from that time, John watched all of the apostles get killed. He was the only one that wasn't martyred for his faith. But at the same time that he was watching all of those struggles, he was remembering another prediction, another promise that God had made, which was that his church would be on the move, and not even the gates of hell itself would be able to stop it. And he had watched. By the time John is penning these words, the church has made its way all the way into Spain and France on the west. On the east, it's gone as far as Georgia and Armenia. It wraps all the way around the Mediterranean. It's made it all nearly to the west coast of Africa, to Carthage. Every prediction that God had made, he was seeing it come to pass. He remembered the Samaritan woman who said, he told me everything I ever did. But John is saying, you don't understand, he told us everything we were ever going to do. And over and over and over. And each one of those only solidified his conviction, his confidence that what Jesus had promised, he was more than able to produce. He wasn't just spewing sentimentality. He was proclaiming a reality that he had seen firsthand and he had experienced in his own life. In the text, Jesus is moving to the cross, and all of the disciples would join him eventually in that death. But the idea was, he was saying, listen, I want you to know it's gonna be hard, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be good. Your life might be hard right now. You might be looking at some difficult things up ahead. But the promise of Christ is not that you're going to get through it, but that you can thrive in the midst of it. And that life, that divine life of thriving, of peace, in the midst of everything else that's going wrong, is the very thing that makes you a light to the world, the salt of the earth. He said, I've told you all this that you would have peace in me. Here on this earth, there will be trials and sorrows, but be brave. Take heart. I have overcome this world. That's what Paul meant when he said you can do everything through Christ who gives you the strength. He didn't mean you're going to make it through it. He didn't mean hold on for dear life. He meant walk into these situations with the confidence that Christ is with you, that Christ has gone before you, that Christ is coming behind you to take everything that happens and somehow fold it forward into his will and his purpose for your life. That's why Paul could say to us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 16, always be, say it with me, joyful. Never stop, say it, praying. And be thankful in all circumstances. Because that's God's will for you who belong to Christ. In everything, give thanks. The team is coming to lead us in a time of worship, and this time is for you. There's a song called Miracles, and it invites us to remember all of the amazing things that God has done in our life. The little moments, the whispers, the hints, all the little God sightings in our lives. And as they begin to sing that over you, I invite you to think, what are the things that are weighing you down? What are the things that are destroying your gratitude and your sense of expectation for your life, for this fall? I encourage you today, write those things down, and when you get a chance, just pin them to one of the crosses. Today, take a moment as they begin to sing and just pray. You can do it right in your seat or find a quiet place in the room. Maybe you could go light one of the candles, or if you'd rather, we have folks who are coming forward. They would love to pray with you. Whatever you do in these next few moments, don't let them pass you by. And then when you're ready, we invite you to stand and worship with us.